I call someone conditioned who lives on condition that he or she remain unaware of the condition. The German philosopher Schelling says, "To condition, bedingen, is the name we give to the action by virtue of which something becomes a thing. Conditioned, bedingt, is what has become a thing, ding." I infer from Schelling's remark that when we call someone a dingaling, we mean that the person is a bell which responds to a bell. If the ends of the rope are tied, the funambulist is free to go in circles only. Here is an example of conditioning, of exclusion of latent associations which, when brought to light, breaks the grip of the concept monopolizing the image. The taste of dill suppressed in connection with the word daffodil. Also, the shit-happy state of mind of being daffy. Unaware of the imp in chimp, I say chimpanzee, unaware of the pansy. Imp and pansy have nothing to do with monkeys, but the sound of the word chimpanzee carries imp and pansy images, albeit the images are overwhelmed by the monkey host. As much as liver and pancreas are marginalized by the human host. The organs are oppressed by the organeer. They are them who prick an ear. Within the chimp, they glimpse the imp. Before the chimp, the bowl of flour chowder. Not a single oak left in Oklahoma. How the parts of the body love American Indian names. The words are free of prescribed images. Breasts swell with pride at Massachusetts. Wisconsin is good for the skin. Lips pucker around the drinking straw. Mississippi. Every day in the mean fields, the mean mines, the meaneries, homo significans makes meaning automatically, hardly without thinking about it. If the tree were still alive, would it be the same age as the axe handle? On the other hand, writes Marx, an entrepreneur of theaters, concerts, brothels, etc., buys the temporary disposal over the labor power of the actors, musicians, prostitutes, etc. In fact, in a roundabout way, that is only a formal economic interest. In its result, the process is the same. He buys this so-called unproductive labor whose services perish in the very instant of their performance, or do not fix or realize themselves in any permanent subject or vendible commodity apart from themselves." Unquote. In other words, when you sell a service, you're the commodity. The day of one's birth is fixed. It cannot be changed, and so it feels fated. Whereas the day of one's death, being undetermined so long as one is alive, seems freer, more flexibly scheduled. Scott, I fear that a culture which reverences birth to the detriment and repression of death allies itself with the established power of the past, presumably as fixed and unchangeable as the day of one's birth, against the nascent power of the present, whose future, like the day of one's death, remains unpredictable, and therefore, to some extent, freely determinable. We're born for the past, we die for the future. Happy Dearth Day, rebel. I suppose that beginning the day at midnight, as in all calendared countries, is an improvement on beginning it at sunset, as with the ancient Israelites, because most of us are asleep and so the absurdity passes unnoticed. Still, even a child knows that the day begins at dawn. So, until we bring official into line with natural, we'll have a devil instead of a good time, because the child in all of us will remain locked in a basement under Greenwich, England. Loyalty to a common origin, how passé. We've left home. We work now toward a common end. Ecommunism, the belief that by the right of birth, each human is equally invested in the global commonwealth. Child, I don't care if Amy is prettier than you or Renee plays the piano. We all die, and that's why we're equal. Dying to be human. I want to try a society whose motto is equal as eggs, different as lizards and geese. That is, economically equal. All else inalienably inequitable. Where equality is customary, rags and riches equally embarrass. Everyone can't be rich. There just aren't enough resources, but everyone can be equal. Imagine a global corporation called Companico. The branches of Companico are located in every city of the world. I'm the me division, you're the you division. As many divisions as there are people. The word common, originally to co-mean, that is, to have the same intention. From Old English gemeine, intended for common use, to be used together. I hear mine in gemeine, as if when the same object is mine for me and mine for you, it's co-mine, or ours. An American ideal is to own and operate your own business. Suppose that it's a just ideal. Suppose further that the ideal deserves to be universally applied. Then mankind ought to own and operate its own business. But owning and operating one's own business usually requires hiring help. But if mankind hires help, its employees do not own and operate their own business. Therefore, the American ideal is incapable of being universally applied without involving mankind in self-contradiction. The communist ideal is the same as the American ideal, namely, for mankind to own and operate its own business. But it's only common sense, as distinct from communist sense, that the ideal is universally attainable only if every member of the workforce is also a partner in the firm. But America is opposed to communism. Therefore, America stands in the way of everyone subscribing to the American ideal. Hence, America opposes itself. Which America do you belong to? I'm an equaholic. Aquatic. Equal as water. Till everyone floats. We're not a fleet. The whole system of capitalist production, Marx sums up, is based on the fact that the workman sells his labor power as a commodity. Unquote. If 10% of the residents of the house of the economy occupy 90% of the rooms, and 90% of the residents occupy 10% of the rooms, then the house of the economy is in an uproar. The function of revolution is to return peace and quiet to the house. The pro-lifers consider a fetus a person because the total absence of freedom of a fetus agrees perfectly with their idea of the natural subordination of the powerless to the powerful. The approach of death slows to a crawl, shrinks space to a crawl space. Freedom is a state of mind such that the feeling of freedom deepens for each in proportion to the increase in the number of people who arrange their personal lives to suit their freedom. Now, a revolution occurs when people arrange their personal lives en masse. That is, when they recover the goods pilfered from them by thieves over the centuries. The goods required to provide a material basis for the goods are required to provide a material basis for sustaining a free state of mind. The revolutionaries readapt the state to serve the state of mind, not the state of mind, the state. Remote control. A troll named Remote. The remote control patrol pulls over the poem. The poem blows it away with mouth spray. I'm not free until you are, and you're not free until I am. But in the meantime, I think that the feeling of freedom that comes with the successful outcome of revolution is like the amazement, exhilaration, and immense relief the exhausted driver feels who awakens with a start at the bottom of 3 Mile Hill with his foot on the gas and the van still on the road. Capital to labor. I own the mirror you stand before. Therefore, your image belongs to me. And so long as you choose to reflect, so also do I own the image maker. Labor to capital. You're my image too. You're my rear view. How I appear to myself from behind, and how I appear is preposterous. Mr. Face maintains that the face reflected in the glass belongs to the person standing before the mirror, namely belongs to himself. But Mr. Glass contends that the face in the mirror belongs to the mirroring person, not to the person in front of the mirror. O learned hand, how shall we determine? The issue here is, does the face in the mirror belong where it appears or to whom it appears? To the originator of the face or to the originator of the reflection of the face? Without the originator of the face, there would be no face to be reflected. But without the originator of the reflection, there would be no reflection to be faced. Similarly, one might ask who owns the reflected light of the sun, the source of the light, or the moon, the source of the reflection. In the same vein, if I look into your eyes and see myself reflected there, who owns the reflection, me or you? Notice, when I ask who owns, I imply as well the question, who doesn't own? Who is trespassing? In other words, ownership here is mutually exclusive. 2 slaughters, 1 slot. The need to own, therefore, must arise out of a condition of scarcity, such that one party must exclude another from possession of an object for one of the two to survive, a result which is preferable to sharing and neither surviving. So that only under the opposite condition of abundance is it possible or even desirable to replace a have-not strategy with a live-let-live one. The ultimate issue, then, is the one of scarcity or abundance. O learned hand, I disagree. Abundance or scarcity is not the key issue. Equality or inequality of distribution of whatever can be made to exist under optimum conditions of production, that's the key issue. Furthermore, if in a group of 3 one hoards so that the other 2 don't have enough, then scarcity is artificially produced. Same in a group of 5 billion, if several 100 million hoard. Therefore, the immediate goal of the revolution is the creation of a global cooperative, call it earthworks, of which every living human is an equal owner. For whether global wealth proves to be abundant and adequate, or scarce and inadequate to support the total population, is not the issue. For if it appears that there is not enough to go around, then all will be equally have-nots, until the condition, if possible, is reversed. Never again will some live at the expense of others. It's equality of survival or extinction. Because inequality of survival maddens the winner, as we have seen with capitalism, as surely as it destroys the loser, with the result that winning is a non-win situation. Maybe even with high-tech industry going full blast, we can't produce enough wealth so that everyone enjoys financial security. Maybe the best we can do, should the resources of the planet prove deficient, is to arrange matters so that everyone is at least financially equally insecure. Whatever the outcome, the time has arrived to goad the majority into assuming its highly vaunted, but so far merely fanciful rulership of the world, to prod it into overruling the administrators of government and industry of every description, to educate it, to shame it into planning the future of the species as if the not yet born were its own progeny, which in fact it is. To lengthen and strengthen its vision in an active and revolutionary manner. Because as things stand now, it's criminal to be rich, criminal to be poor, and these being the only options, not only is it a crime to be alive, but it's criminal not to revolt against such a life. That's why I propose financial security for all, if we can afford it. Equal insecurity if we can't, but in any case, equality. Because under the present vicious circumstances, not superior but equal income makes for a quality life. Hierarchy for hire. Rent a bureaucrat. Crats by the tubful. I feel that we are things which feel deeply about being things. Things which take themselves personally. As for predicting the outcome of the revolution, save yourself the trouble. What root ever correctly predicted the nature of its blossom? Property rights. Seed owns root. Root owns sprout. Sprout owns leafage. Leafage owns stem. Stem owns bud. Bud owns blossom. Blossom owns plant. The plant, however, must contest ownership with the ant, who found the seed and left it for safekeeping in a hole. The plant is really the history of its parts. It's an idea. Each part has a specific and specialized local history, but all the local histories necessarily in the plant, only voluntarily among humans, converge into a single narration called Fufu the plant, Choco the social body. For each part of the plant has contributed blindly, intuitively, its vague, shadowy sense of self-identity, which converging, where? Yes, converging in the mind of the gardener, has produced the plant's idea of itself, has yielded consciousness. That's the reason why the gardener, the repository of the plant's self-awareness, the living proof that Fufu the plant is impatiently waiting, smiles to himself, even while he takes the kinks out of the hose and turns on the water. The idea of ownership, like a wintry blast, has frozen in place all the contents of the mind. But once the contents own equally the idea of ownership, the suitcase will travel south of its own accord. I sense the collective unconscious, dream by dream, rising to consciousness. If each is uniquely itself, All are alike. Canto to bureaucracy. Bureau, from Latin burra, Spanish burro, a rough red cloth for covering a desk. From the covering, the desk with drawers becomes known as a bureau. Burlap is the English cognate. The root bur, B-U-R, is a variant of the Indo-European root pyr, P-Y-R, B and P interchangeable labials, U and Y, different transcriptions of the same vowel sound, which means fire, and by extension red or flame-colored. Hence, latent in the word image bureau is burn, and with the labial fallen away, the euro, U-R-O, root derivatives, irritation, urine, urn, for the ashes of the dead. The Latin bustos, combustos, is the place where the bodies of the dead were burned. Echoingly, we speak of red, like fire, tape, in connection with a bureau. Also, of information buried, like the dead, in the bureau's files. Etymologically speaking, the word burger, burger, is a cousin of bureau. In Greek, the root pyr, as I say, means fire. Pyrgos is a watchtower or fire tower attached to the walls of the ancient city, and Burgos is a dialectic variant of Pyrgos. So, the first burghers were night watchmen. The last shall be first, promised Jesus. Their first place of business was the fire tower. See the opening of Aeschylus's Agamemnon for a depiction of the type. They began as castle firefighters. They bought charred ground, the first fire sales. Or, if your building was on fire as in Rome, Crassus offered to buy it at a very low price, or your building burned to the ground. Thank you, Jonathan. War proved good for business. An image latent in burger is urgent because the property is on fire. Also, I hear the urgency and emergency. The urgent world of the burger versus the ardent world of the worker. Firefighter versus arsonist. Also, imminent role reversal. The boss has burned down the factory when the help refuses to leave. Welcome to purgatory. Riddle. What happens when the fireman is in charge of the city? Why, it blazes night and day. If you want to take the vice out of service, take the sir out of service. Business lore. If it's the right location, you can hang turds on a string and sell them as wind chimes. The avant-garde is concerned, the rear guard defensive, but by far the largest part of the social body, the off-guard, is unconscious. The letter E that begins the word equality falsely suggests that originally the word was equality, as if when we're equal, we lose the very quality that distinguishes us from others. But that's not what I mean by equality. I mean the strictly economic equality which results from ending the division in human society between worklords and workers. My idea is that there are many different kinds of workers, but only one workload. The money value of that load we divide equally as an expression of our commitment to treat each other with mutual respect. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, by 1989, the top 1% of American households had a greater net worth than the bottom 90%. Now, If total net worth of all American households is $15.4 trillion, and we divide it by 90 million American households, then each household is worth $166,666 if the total net worth of the country is distributed equally. So, what I mean by equality is that the only difference we surrender is the economic one, which, as the statistics strongly suggest, at present suppresses more self-differentiation than it encourages. Our differences need our mutual support. We can't be ourselves until we assure each other that our differences are equally valuable. And economic equality provides that assurance. Imagine this sentence as a single lifetime. Now that you're dead, you have to admit that life has meaning. But note, although one by one the words transmit the meaning appears to be a unity, a single package. So the meaning does not lie in the multiplicity of the words, which would be a list, but in their combination. But I think you will admit that the combination, isolated from the rest of the language, would by itself still lack meaning. Hence the words are spokespersons for the entire language, which, as it were, underwrites every combination that makes sense. Nevertheless, if you were to pay each word for its contribution to the meaning of the sentence, imagine this sentence is a single lifetime. Under capitalism, the subject you understood, the verb imagine, and the substantives lifetime and sentence, the heavy semantic guns of the sentence, so to speak, would receive executive salaries, while the linkage is, and the adjective single, and the article a, the light semantic artillery, would be paid wages below the line of management. But under communism, the words are paid equally because the meaning of the sentence is a social product of the language in its entirety, of the syntax, to name one aspect, just as waves breaking on the shore is the social product of the ocean. Moreover, who would be so foolish as to pay the left foot more than the right for running, or the little toe less than the foot, or the sand less than the sun for a beautiful day? Miles outside myself, I grope through hope and dope, rope and nope, toward home. A person, claims Hegel, by distinguishing himself from himself, relates himself to another person. Unquote. Since when I observe myself, my observing other by definition must detach itself from me in order to create the distance between me and it implicit in the act of self-observation, with regard to me it becomes somehow disembodied. And so long as my observer remains disembodied, I naturally continue to bring up the rear. Lately, however, I have noticed this disencumbered point of view express interest in attaching itself to a social body, even if only to the hypothetical one of a future communist society. What I suspect is that in general it wants to possess a more durable body than mine, a body that will survive me. But by settling upon a social body, not yet actual except negatively in the form of its capitalist denial, it wins my admiration. For it proves to me that it will risk the extinction it was created to abhor, rather than act as an accomplice in the murder of one who, like itself, scarcely exists. When I practice self-consciousness and split into one and other, one remaining with me, the other out socializing, I don't imagine that the other has eloped to heaven and become eternal. and that after it puts in a good word for me, the winches will whir, and I will be lifted off the ground and pulled into heaven like a rich man through a hole in his shoe. I imagine, rather, that my other is at this moment joining others like itself, who crowd into metaphor, which proliferates into poem, which extrudes poet, who mounts the armored car of revolution, which, passed from friend to friend and modified, arrives beyond the grave like a party bus for those we would have loved to receive with love instead of coldly. Now, a city is an aggregate of houses, lands, and possessions, writes Aristotle in the Oikonomika, sufficient to make possible the good life. It is clear from the fact that if this end cannot be obtained, that is, the good life, the community itself is dissolved. Further, it is with this end in mind, the good life, that men associate together. Unquote. Geneticists describe all the genes available to the members of a species as a gene pool, as if the genes were contained in a single reservoir instead of distributed among all the members. Correspondingly, I imagine that the sexual pleasure experienced in toto by all the participants in the human gene pool likewise is gathered together and stored in the voluptorium. Therefore, when we fuck, our sexual pleasure represents a libidinous withdrawal from the community tank, like runoff from a reservoir. Hence, in your nakedness, I view all women, since all women draw libido from the same well. So, when we fuck, I fuck all women, the living, the dead, the unborn, including but not especially my mother, ever mindful that the species has a finger, so to speak, in every copulation. On one side is the voluptorium, but here on the other side is no one but me, the ghost which my body imagines haunts it. The ghost which my body imagines is seated by yours, like gods at an orgy. We, the gods, are fictions made by flesh. From our point of view, our bodies lie open like books. And if it were not for the fact we look out of as well as upon these pages, we'd swear we had written them. A fifth sort of demos, or town, the word that democracy comes from, the Greek word, is composed of a fifth sort of demos is composed of unskilled laborers, Aristotle observes, and persons whose means are too small to enable them to enjoy leisure. Unquote. Carl Jung said that we're all unconsciously part of one collection. Karl Marx defined revolution as the act in defiance of every partiality or privilege, segmentation or compartmentalization that obstructs and obscures consciousness of our collective unity. Rabbi Crossbones, that we resist becoming one out of fear of living alone. For so long as we're embroiled, we sustain the illusion of having multiple destinies instead of just one, which is only one away and therefore dangerously close to having none.